It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love each other and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains.
It was December 1969, and I was 13. Jocelyn would be 14 on the first of the year. I would not be 14 until April. Still, it seemed that she was 2 generations older than me. This unnerved me and tied my tongue like a pair of old shoes tangled on a wire. Not only did it seem that Jocelyn Brown had grown 26 years in the past 13, but she was quiet-spoken and wise in a way that was neither showy nor strange. When she said, "Hello, Brother Frank," she sounded as grown as those soft-talking Muslim women or those sure-footed women in the Panthers, those grown Black women who touch your face or hold your hand and speak your name like they know how bad you hurt inside because once upon a time they were hurting inside just like you. And now they're into a movement that takes away their pain, something you always wanted to be part of but couldn't name. That's how Jocelyn Brown sounded when she spoke to me. Something inside me felt warm and loved, and something else inside was all shook up and running scared. I was speechless in the face of such integrity. Maybe we called him Wolfman on account of his hair that made him look like Jimi Hendrix. Or maybe it was because, unlike any of the other boys at St. Mary's, he was already shaving. Or perhaps it was because he was the only 8th grader who was taller and bigger than any 9th and 10th grader. Word was the high school coach wanted him to start at middle linebacker as soon as he hit 9th grade. No junior varsity for Wolfman. His father was not in his life. His mother was white. This, Wolfman told me one day from the depths of a reefer haze, was the same as having no parents at all. Wolfman was politicized in a way few other kids at St. Mary's were, except Jocelyn. He knew Black folks were on the move, and he was ready to seize the time. This strained relations between him and his mother. Black folks are on the move, Wolfman used to say. Whitey better get with it and get behind us. His mother, however, was not convinced that her destiny was to follow her son into nation time. Rather than waste this precious revolutionary period trying to tell her what time it is, Wolfman explained to me, I spend as much time as I can away from her. To which I would nod and say, I know that's right. It's the same shit I go through with my mom, and she ain't even white. At least your mom's got that melantonic pigmentation thing as her excuse. You know what I'm saying? I may have been the only one who could offer such erudite commentary on his mother without getting knocked into next week. We would stand in the shadows of St. Mary's schoolyard and talk about our parents and talk about Huey P. Newton and Eldridge Cleaver and try to decide who was right between the two of them and talk about Mao and Ho Chi Minh and try to decide who was the baddest between the two of them. We'd be so high we could predict the exact date, the exact time, and the exact place that would set off a revolution. Our repartees were so righteous and the reefer was so good that we forgot how cold it was and where it was we were supposed to be.
The Panthers led tours of the apartment for that 10-day period.
I got it in my head that we should have a look-see. To my surprise, Jocelyn said this was a good idea, at which point I panicked. I get home not only late, but late at night. The beating that waited for me would have 2 justifications instead of 1. Disruption of a Roman Catholic ritual and a patriotic pledge that morning in homeroom, coupled with my violation of Frank and Ida Lorraine's curfew. As anxiety bubbled up inside me, I stayed cool and copacetic. I displaced Mom would tear into you if you went to the scene of a Panther police shootout. No, she wouldn't. Olivia's been involved in talks between SNCC and the Panthers. They might even merge. Well, what I mean is, you being a girl and all, she'd probably be all up in your shit for being out so late. Not like dude, you dig, who can just come and go and nobody trips. My mother rarely comes out of a bag, she said matter-of-factly, and she doesn't whoop me. For a while, I walked in jealous silence. Your parents whoop you? She asked. Shit, they ain't crazy. I looked away. Your parents down with the revolution? She wondered. Of course. I'm surprised you'd ask me a question like that. Everybody at my crib is down with the revolution. My 4-year-old brother be shouting off the pigs on his way to nursery school. I didn't ask you about your baby brother. I asked you about your parents. And I told you. They're down with all that shit. Even took us to Jesse Jackson's church for an Operation Breadbasket rally. The Cannonball Adderley Quintet played at the break. Olivia said, Jesse Jackson is no Fred Hampton. And Operation Breadbasket is not the Black Panther. Fine, I said. My parents aren't down with the revolution. We reached the corner and waited 300 years for the damn light to turn green. Since King died, I confessed, I don't know if they're down with anything. We crossed the street. Tonight, they're going to beat me for what I did this morning in homeroom. What we did, she said. She held my wounded hand, and I welcomed the pain of her grip. I began to cry. We were standing at the bottom of the stairs under the long iron tracks of Chicago's L train. We should run away together, she said, holding me in her arms, trying to stop me, if not from crying, then at least from shivering. Crash at the Panther pad till we've saved enough money to go find my sister Olivia in New York. The rock and tumble of the train rambling above our heads ceased. Or you could come live at my house. She led me by the hand up the stairs. Mama's always saying we need a man around the house. And you're just the kind of man she means. I know it. I just know it. On the train, she reads from a letter she received from her sister. Olivia writes her all about SNCC and the growing pains of an organization that started off agitating for voting rights and integration and now finds itself struggling with the next phase, the revolutionary phase. Olivia is angry about the murder of Fred Hampton. She asks if there were really 90 bullet holes in the apartment. Jocelyn is emboldened. She has a task. She has a responsibility to get hold of vital information and then pass it on to her big sister. At the end of the letter, Olivia says that she is writing from New York, where the Panthers and SNCC are holding talks. She says that she visits the United Nations whenever she can and that she might send for Jocelyn next summer. She writes that she met a man from South Africa at the UN, and he was as distraught by the murder of Fred Hampton and Mark Clark as she was. The brother is from a place called Guinea-Bissau, where the revolution has matured. He informs me that the ANC, that stands for African National Congress, has written an official letter of revolutionary condolences and solidarity to the Black Panther Party and all Black insurgents in the United States. As we come to our stop, Jocelyn folds the letter and asks what the ANC is and how they had heard about us. As Jocelyn and I left Hyde Park on the L, I didn't know that SNCC was dying as an organization, that the Voting Rights Act and federally mandated busing had thrust her sister's organization to the brink of a crisis of purpose. Jocelyn Brown knew all the names of SNCC leaders: Stokely Carmichael, Bernice Reagan, Kathleen Cleaver, who is now a Panther, Julian Bond, Marion Barry, and James Foreman. She knew the songs, and she told me she had the pictures, those black and white photos of SNCC demonstrations and meetings in her room. Looking back on our journey to the house of Fred Hampton's assassination, I have one regret, one biting regret. I wish that I had had the confidence of a grown man and not the shy anxiety of a 13-year-old boy. Enough forward motion as we stood beneath the columns of bolted steel that held the rambling train above us to draw her close and kiss her. Instead, I asked her if she had change or tokens for the train. It was music, sweet soul music that saved us from ourselves. It came from within a place that would not have announced itself as anything more than a beauty shop, a barber shop, or a storefront church, if not for the speakers clipped to the awning and the sound of Martha Reeves and the Vandellas painting the sidewalk with watercolor love. In Detroit, I developed a new theory of evolution. The way I saw it, Berry Gordy created the world. On the first day, he made the Temptations. On the second day, he made the Supremes. Day 3, it was the Four Tops. Then came Smokey, followed by Mary Wells. And when, on the day 6, Marvin Gaye stepped out of his cloud, old Barry stopped for a moment to catch his breath. On the 7th day, the world got down. Jocelyn took my hand and we went inside. A handsome, slender man with combed hair came from the back room and leaned on the counter, a toothpick balanced between his teeth. The sign above him read, Jimmy Mac's 45s, back to back. She walked over to the register and kissed him on the cheek. Hello, Uncle Jimmy. How you making, brown sugar? Mussolini vamped on me, she said. Why my sister sends you to that school, I swear, he said. Then he looked at me and broke into a 52-teeth grin that embarrassed us both. So when's the wedding, brown sugar? She gave him a forget you wave of the hand. He walked to the end of the counter where the Martha Reeves 45 was scratching round and round in the groove. He lifted the needle. Ain't got to be J. Edgar whoever to see you two in love. Yes, indeedy, son. You gonna marry my niece? I almost had a heart attack. Don't mind him, Jocelyn said. He can be as tired as a $2 bill. That's what Mama says. It's a question, son. $2 or no $2. You're embarrassing him, Uncle Jimmy. Embarrassing him? Ain't that a blippity-blop? He searched the shelf for another 45. He found what he wanted. He kissed the record, then put it on and said, You two lovebirds groove on this. It was Martha Reeves and the Vandellas, My Baby Loves Me, a sultry, sure enough slow jam. Don't you have any Sly Stone? Said Jocelyn. I said, groove on this, lest you want me to keep at your little band here. Go on, girl. Take Jody in your arms. He sure ain't gonna come to you. Just look at him. His name is Frank B Wilderson III, and he's from out of town. Her indignation tickled Jimmy Mac. You don't mean the Frank B Wilderson III, the big-time shipping tycoon from out of town? Where are you from, boss? New York? L.A.? I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota, I said proudly. The toothpick flew from his mouth and he laughed. And you mad 'cause I called him Jody? He's probably high, Jocelyn whispered. We'll dance just to humor him. But I can't dance, I whispered. Now don't lie, Jody, he shouted over Martha's searching moans. You black, ain't you? Then you can dance. What you do up your way, the snowshoe? Go ahead on and do a little snowshoe for me. I swear, girl, you're going to marry this fool and have a rhythmless baby. She held me, and we slow dragged. Just ignore him, she said. He talks more shit than a radio. He'll tire out in a minute or two. You wish, Jimmy called back. Jocelyn and I held hands on one side, and drew each other close around the waist with the other. We moved slowly and easily, as though we'd done this before. The record was reaching a soulful crescendo, and all the while Jimmy Mack was leaning on the counter, smiling, chuckling to himself, singing backup, as though Martha Reeves had signed him as the fourth Vandella. When the record stopped, Jimmy Mack told us not to move. We were fine with that. We liked holding each other, and it gave us an excuse to keep holding each other. He put on Etta James' At Last so effortlessly you'd think he had it up his sleeve. We slow danced. Lord have mercy, how we slow danced. I took her in my arms, no hand-holding now. I held her like I wanted to hold her under the L. We turned slowly, twining into each other with all the longing we could muster until, at last, Etta James called down from heaven and told us to stop. We didn't walk from Jimmy Mack's 45s back to back to Fred Hampton's house. We glided. We soared. We sailed. Once in a while, we landed on a runway next to some unknown someone's snow-tapered steps. We refueled with kisses, hungry, grown-ass kisses. And that unknown someone's grandma raised the window and said, "Stop all that filthy McNasty carrying on. You two ain't grown." We were still holding hands, chirping like sparrows when we ran up against the backside of a middle-aged couple. The man and the woman turned abruptly. They looked like Mississippians who had fled Jim Crow with one-way tickets on the Illinois Central. The man's face soured as he looked down at us, but the woman smiled discreetly. She spoke sternly to us. "You children need to stand in line quietly and wait your turn. This ain't a playground. 2 men have died inside, brutally murdered." I peered around him. We were indeed at the end of a line that was almost a block long, a line running up the stairs and into the building. The whole community had turned up, and the icy cold evening was chilled like a wake. I was not prepared for what I saw inside Fred Hampton's apartment. I remember a voice ringing in my ear, a distant and incessant voice from across the room, the voice of a young Black Panther explaining the procession as it flowed into one room and out the other. The pigs had vamped in the wee hours of the morning when the folks inside were asleep. How they came with murder on their minds. How they shot Mark Clark in the heart through the door he was going to open for them. How they burst in and scrambled over his body with machine guns blazing. How another contingent came up the back stairs across the porch into the kitchen, then broke into the bedroom and lit the bed up. The bed where Chairman Fred slept with his pregnant wife lit that sleeping bed up with bullets like fireworks lighting up the sky. Did he say that? Did he really say they fired into the bed of a sleeping man and a pregnant woman? Tell me he didn't say that. They yanked her from the bed and threw her up against the wall in the kitchen? They went back and shot him in the head? He's dead, did they say? He's good and dead now? I held Jocelyn's arm and looked around the room with the voice of the guide folded over me like veils of water. I saw the bullet holes, 99 bullet holes, machine gun, shotgun, handgun bullet holes in the walls, in the door, in the bed, that blood-red bed where Chairman Fred was pronounced good and dead.
He's good and dead now.
Sensing something frightened and chaotic in my demeanor, the sour-faced man from Mississippi touched me and said, "Breathe. Just breathe." Then he said, "We got to move into the kitchen. Let the folks behind us come through." He nodded toward Jocelyn. "You got to protect her." I looked down and said, "Yes, sir." I wish I had a different memory of my arrival home that night than the one I have. I wish I remembered telling my parents about Jimmy Mack's jokes and Fred Hampton's blood, about the bullets and the sorrow, about the clamor of the L train, but that is not the memory I have. I enter the flat to find them fierce with worry over my whereabouts and beside themselves with fury over my refusal to pledge allegiance and pray that morning in homeroom. The belt and the yardstick lay on the dining room table like a courtroom exhibit. The rituals of preliminary words begin, the words needed to anoint the moment with enough resolve to commence flogging. Then they set upon me with their implements. I would like to say that I took the beating in my revolutionary stride, my back straight, my eyes dry, the searing pain on my thighs and buttocks melting into water and rolling off. One thing I can say in my defense, however, is that I walked into every one of those beatings with my eyes open. It could even be said that I provoked them. I knew that acts of political defiance at school presaged such evening rituals at the gulags, what some people call home. And I was not a passive victim, for I could always find a way to get my licks in. That evening was no exception. At last, they are spent and exhausted, though still very much upon me. With the belt and the splintered yardstick, they stalk me to my bedroom. They chant their tired, dreary chants. Better not do this, better not do that. Better be the first to pledge and the loudest to pray. Better straighten up and fly right. I stumble before them, crying my eyes off, snotty at the beak. My siblings peek through their cracked doors, political lackeys, cowered by kickbacks of candy, chump change, and Saturday morning cartoons. I give them the evil eye, state collaborators. Richard Daley's two goons follow me into my bedroom. My teeth are chattering. As I sit on the bed, I suddenly know how I'm going to get my licks in. It's been tacked to my wall for weeks, just waiting for me to wield it as a weapon. As I look at the wall, so does my dad. "What are you signifying?" he says. It's a photograph from Life magazine. A middle-aged Chinese man about the same age as my father. Beside him is a Chinese girl, maybe 3 or 4 years older than me. The man is kneeling. The girl is standing. The Life photographer has synchronized the opening and closing of his shutter with the pull of a trigger, with a plume of flint from the pistol she holds. She is blowing the man's brains out. "Play with me if you want to." "Uh-huh. That's right. Play with me if you want to," my father says. I am lucid. I look him right in the eye. It's a picture from the Cultural Revolution, I tell him. The man owns a lot of land, an avaricious businessman. The girl is a member of the Red Guard. He refused to divide his land with all the people who are poor and need to eat. My parents are perplexed. They look at the picture and look back at me. They still don't get it. How am I going to get my licks in if the lesson is over their heads? I break it to them gently. The man is a counter-revolutionary, I say. He's also her father. Now they get it. They get it big time. Dad's eyes go wild. "Haven't you had enough?" "I guess not, Slick, I think." "Do I have to beat the living daylights out of you?" "Go for what you know, Homer, I think." I stare back at him. Only one of two things can happen here. I will break this stare down, or I will get more of his rage. "He's stone crazy," Mom intervenes with a clinical observation. "I'm tired. Let's go to bed." They make their way to the warden's quarters. They are no longer upon me.